Hey everyone, Mo here, and before the video begins, I just want to let you guys know that my schedule has opened up for me to do coaching again. So if you're interested in private one-on-one coaching for me to help you, whether you're a newer player and you want to excel at the game very quickly and learn the fundamentals without developing any bad habits early, or if you're an experienced player who's already maybe platinum or diamond in your top 1%, but you need some help filling in the gap to get you to that 0.01%, to make you just some of the best, then hit me up on Discord and I can get you in some private one-on-one coaching lessons to help you polish up any skills you want to refine and help you learn all of the secrets to becoming a top player. That's it. I hope you enjoy the video. Hey everybody, Mo here, and in this episode of Deck Guides for Dummies, I'm going to be bringing you guys an updated Deck Guides for Dummies on Deep. So I did the Deck Guide for Dummies on Deep a while ago, like when Deep first came out. I was a huge advocate for Deep. I did really well with Deep in some tournaments, and since then, the deck really hasn't changed the idea of what it wants to do, but it's changed a lot of the cards inside of it because we've gotten a lot more deep support since then. And you'll notice here that the deck list has changed a lot, and people have asked me to do an updated Deep guide because of how different the Deep deck has changed. So we're going to be going over all the new cards in Deep. Now, basically, for those of you that don't know how my deck guides work, I'm going to go over the purpose of each card in the deck, the general curves you want to look for with the deck, and then a mulligan strategy against each of the archetypes in some of the tier 1 decks. So before we get into the deck guide, I want to remind you guys that we're really close to hitting that 3,000 subscriber milestone. So I'd really appreciate it if you could hit the subscribe button, help us get to that milestone, as well as just helps me out so much with the YouTube algorithm. So that's it for the intro. Let's get into the deck guide. Alright, so the first thing we'll go over here is each card in the deck and the purpose it serves in the deck. So there are some staple cards here that are in all of the Deep decks from the very beginning to now, like Devourer of the Depths, a couple Abyssal Eyes, still Nautilus, still like one Maokai. This one even has a Shipwreck Order in it. So we're going to go start from the top here and go to the bottom, because there are a lot of new cards that have either been added to LOR that have made it into the Deep decks, or you will notice that a lot of the cards that were in the Deep decks originally have been cut for various other cards. So start at the top here, Fading Memories. So 2 Fading Memories. Fading Memories is a really good way to keep getting more activators for Deep. So you can go like Dredgers on 1, Fading Memories it if you need to, and you can just hyper Deep that way. Fading Memories is really good on any of these cards that toss. Fading Memories is good on your Jaw Hunters to have extra Challenger units. Fading Memories is really good in the late game after you have a Nautilus and stuff like that on Devourer of the Depths, so you can have another way to kill things, as well as you can use Fading Memories on your opponent's cards, and it goes through Spell Shield, so you can use Fading Memories on like a Ruin Runner to push the last couple damage if you need to. The biggest thing is Fading Memories an elusive unit, so you can have an elusive blocker against all of these elusive aggro degenerate decks, and it's really good in that regards. So Fading Memories is just a super versatile card. It can help you combo off really quickly with some of these tossing cards, and then it can help you be very versatile late game with all of your like Devourer of the Depths, Challengers, and your opponent's units. Drug Dredgers, very staple card, 1 mana, 2/1, toss 3, very good. Jettison, same thing, it just helps you toss, get to Deep faster. So 2 Bone Skewer. Bone Skewer was really good and was added basically for Deep. To have a combat trick, and it's really good because that's some of the things Deep was missing, was just really good impactful spells. And with Bone Skewer now, it's a one-sided single combat, so it's almost like a Concerted Strike for 2 mana. But the downside is you put a card on top of your deck. Well, that's really good. You could play like Deadbloom Wanderer on turn 3 if you have 2 spell mana. If you go like Drag Dredgers on turn 1, Pass on turn 2, Deadbloom on turn 3, you can block something with Deadbloom, Bone Skewer the Deadbloom Wanderer onto something else. So if you're against discard aggro, right, you could put Deadbloom onto a like 2-power unit, and then you can Bone Skewer the Deadbloom onto a Draven. It kills the Draven, and then now you have Deadbloom Wanderer on top of your deck, so you can replay it and then toss again. It's really good when you early game to get all these toss units again to help you go deep turbo fast, as well as in the late game. If you have Devourer of Depths, you could go, okay, Devourer of Depths, kill something, right? Like obliterate something, and then you do a Bone Skewer, make your Devourer of the Depths deal 7 to something, kill something else now with Bone Skewer, and then the Devourer of Depths is right on top of your deck, so you get to devour something the very next turn. So out of that, you paid essentially 8 mana to obliterate 2 units and kill a 3rd unit, and you have a 7/7 body at the end of the day on the board. So that's insane value towards the end of the game, and that's why a lot of people run 2 Bone Skewer. Sea Scarab is actually the king of Deep now. This is by far the best card in your deck. It's the best sea monster in your deck. It helps you toss like passively, so you don't have to go out of your way to be proactive to toss, and that's really, really good. For those of you that don't know, Deep is actually a fundamentally flawed deck, and Legends of Runeterra, being reactive is almost always better than being proactive. It's fundamentally better to be the reactive player than it is to be the proactive player. If your opponent, for instance, spends 2 mana to do a single combat, well, now the person reacting to the single combat is going to be at a much more advantage, or a much higher advantage, sorry. You're going to have knowledge to know exactly what you need to play around the single combat. Assuming you both started with the same mana, you're going to have more mana to react to because your opponent spent 2 of theirs. You still have that 2 mana to play whatever you want, as well as your opponent spent mana and went down to a certain number of mana, so you know exactly what their response is going to be. So for instance, if you're against Shin Jarvan, if they single combat and go down to only 3 mana, you now know that at most what they can respond with is some like 2 mana combat trick. They can't respond with a barrier because all of the barriers cost 4 mana. They can't respond with a deny, so if you play a larger spell, they can't stop it because they can only play Nopify on 2 mana. And it's just a small little tangent about how being reactive is just fundamentally better, and that's always the problem with Deep, is you have to be proactive. You have to proactively be playing Deadbloom Wanderers, proactively playing your Dreg Dredgers. After you play Nautilus, you have to proactively be playing units after that and spending your mana first in order to toss 2 and then get the little sapling guy off of it. Sea Scarab is really, really good because it lets you passively toss things by just playing units. You don't have to go out of your way to spend mana for Jettison. You don't have to go out of your way to draw cards with like Salvage and Abyssal Eye. You just play units, and you're telling your opponent, okay, you either block the unit, they die, and I get to toss a bunch and hit Deep faster, or you don't block my unit, and I'm just going to casually hit you for 3 or 5 damage over and over and over again until you decide you're just dead, and you have to block, and then I have to, you know, get Deep because you're blocking my units and they're dying. So Sea Scarab is huge, as well as it's cheap. It only costs 2. And with Lure of the Depths, the second best card in your deck, it makes your Sea Scarab only cost 1. So you get to play this 1 mana 2/3, which is nuts. Your nut draws, which we'll get into in the future, is like double Lure, and then you just have 0 mana Sea Scarabs, and you're just like winning the game and not playing a fair game at all. But that's why Sea Scarab is so important, because it lets you passively toss cards, and it actually helps you break that fundamentally flawed part of Deep. Vile Feast. So Vile Feast is just good anti-aggro. It kills any type of cheap units. I mean, Deep's worst matchups are going to be aggro. Aggro and then just like a bunch of big Frostbite units. But for the most part, aggro is really hard for you to deal with. So that's why Vile Feast is really good. Deadbloom Wanderer, same thing. It helps you deal with aggro as well as just tosses. So it's like a Dredgers, but just bigger. It's with lifesteal, so it's just a nice staple. Jaw Hunters, again, another nice staple. Jaw Hunters is really big right now because it's a good way to kill things like Sivir and to kill things like all of your spell shield units. It's, if you notice here, it's 4/1, so it has 4 attacks, so it even kills a Ruin Runner on turn 5. If your opponent plays Ruin Runner, if you just pass with the attack token on turn 5, your opponent plays a Ruin Runner, you can now just play a Jaw Hunters and then trade your Jaw Hunters for their Ruin Runner, or at the very least force them to use a combat trick. And then you're not the most upset because you get to you got the combat trick out of their hand on a defensive turn to keep their unit alive, instead of having them use that combat trick on an offensive turn to kill you and deal extra damage. So that's always not bad. Lure of the Depths, like I said earlier, second best card in the game, makes your sea monsters ever cost 1 less, and then it draws you a sea monster. This card is nuts with Sea Scarab. A lot of the times, if I have a Dreg Dredgers on turn for turn 1 and I also have a Lure of the Depths, I actually won't play my Dreg Dredgers because that's how strong Lure of the Depths is you just want to go like pass on turn 1, Lure on turn 2. Because this card will single-handedly carry your game if you can go Lure of the Depths into Sea Scarab. And those are the only games where Deep feels like super oppressive. Deep, for the most part, is a super fair deck and feels very like underwhelming a lot of the times. And except for the games where you get like Lure into Sea Scarab or you just get like double Lure, then the games just feel super unfair and you are super, super good. 1 Maokai, just because having the ability to level Maokai, having that threat there is really, really nice. But if you notice, people cut down off of the 3 and 2 Maokai to just 1 because he's kind of just an okay card. Salvage, because it helps you go deep as well as refills your hand, so you can get a bunch of sea monsters in the late game. Abyssal Eye, standard, good, elusive sea monster, draws you a card, that's nice. Withering Wail for anti-aggro, because aggro is one of your worst matchups. 3 Devour of the Depths, because Devour of the Depths is one of your best sea monsters. It comes into play, it starts killing things as soon as turn 6. You don't even need a leveled Nautilus. It's just really nice when you have leveled Nautilus, but it's just one of your best units because it's a removal spell. It's a huge tempo swing. You can think of this as like a Tri-Beam. Tri-Beam is really good. Why? It's really good because it kills your opponent's unit and then also gives you a unit, so it's a huge tempo swing. Devour the Depths is the same thing. it comes into play and you get a 7/7 body, and then you get to remove your opponent's Jarvan, or remove your opponent's Jinx, or remove your opponent's champion, basically. And that's why it's such a big deal. One Atrocity, because you like having the late game. I personally sometimes play 2 Atrocity. Depending on the meta, like I won't play a Shipwreck Quarter and I'll just play an Atrocity. But in these grindier games where people are playing Vengeances and you're just trying to go more into the late game, Shipwreck Quarter is really nice because it gets you those treasures, and treasures are broken sometimes. You can just get like, oh, I get 5 random cards that cost 0, and you know, I just win the game, and it's really hard for opponent to play around it. Sometimes you get a 5 mana, make 3 8/8 fearsomes in your play, and your opponent can't deal with it. Treasures are just super good, and having that extra sea monster, as well as just having a 10 power body in play to go with the Atrocity, is really nice. And of course, 3 Nautilus, just because, you know, it's a deep deck, so you have to play Nautilus, makes all your sea monsters cost less, as well as it's just a ginormous 13/13 body. So that's why each card is in the deck. Now we're going to go over general curves, and we're going to go over a mulligan portion. So we're just going to jump right into it. The general curves of this deck, you have a couple. So you have the very standard, like 1, 2, 3 curve of Dreg Dredgers on 1, Sea Scarab on 2, Deadbloom or Jaw Hunters on 3. Then you have, like, you know, Maokai on 4, Abyssal on 5, Devour on 6. So you can always play your units, just sit here and slam them out on curve, and that's perfectly fine. Some of the other curves that are better are if you pass on turn 1, like you don't play the Dreg Dredgers, you can Lure of the Depths on turn 2, you get a Sea Scarab. On turn 3, if you have second Lure of the Depths, then now all of your sea monsters cost 2 less, so you can just sit there and go like 0 mana Sea Scarab, 0 mana Sea Scarab. On turn 4, which is the turn after you'll play your second Lure, you can actually start playing Devour of Depths. So you just have like a 4 mana 4/4, which is, you know, not bad in stat wise, but then it's also just a 4 mana 4/4 that obliterates almost every other unit that comes into play at that time that's being played right now. So it's super nice. And you just get like this huge simple advantage. If you ever get to play the Nautilus, then all of your units just cost 0. Except for the one Shipwreck Quarter you play costs 1 mana, but everything else costs literally 0 because they have 4 mana base stats now because of the Lure of the Depths. So you just get to spit out your entire hand with this Nautilus, and it's just not fair. So those are really the curves you're looking for, is the curves of either just Dreg Dredgers, Sea Scarab, Deadbloom Wanderer, or you want to go pass on turn 1, Lure of the Depths on 2, and then start like playing really cheap and crazy sea monsters. Maybe even like the nuttiest curves, like I said, where turn 2 Lure, turn 3 Lure, and then you start popping off with Sea Scarabs. And, so the curves with this deck is very simple. It's either play all your units on curve, or try and get as many Lures out as early as possible. So the final portion of this video is just going to be Mulligan guide. And so we're going to give you Mulligan tips for the 3 archetypes, or 3 major archetypes. So aggro, control, and mid-range. So against aggro decks, you're really just going to want Dreg Dredgers and Sea Scarab are both really good. Having a 1 mana 2/1 blocker is really good against aggro. Having a 2 mana 2/3 blocker is really good against aggro. And then you're going to want your Vile Feast and Deadbloom Wanderer, basically all the cards that gain you life. Vile Feast is good because it kills off any 2/1s, as well as gives you a 1/1 blocker. And then, of course, Deadbloom is really good because it's a card that tosses for you, so it helps you go with your game plan and advance your game plan, as well as it has lifesteal, so it can trade with a lot of the X3s in the meta right now, as well as gain you a bunch of life. So against Misfortune, for instance, as you see over here, Misfortune is a 3 mana 3/3. If you play Deadbloom Wanderer on turn 3, you get to block and kill your opponent's Misfortune, and then gain 2 life at the same time. Or you gain 3 life, but the Misfortune ability deals 1. So you get to gain 3 life at the same time as killing something like a Misfortune, or, you know, killing any of those like 2 or 3 attack units at the moment. It's good against like Lurk, you get to kill all their units or trade with it. Good against things like Fearsome blockers because, you know, it has 3 power. So anytime they play a Fearsome unit attacking on turn 3, you get to block it and then gain a bunch of life. So it's really good to get your aggro decks. And then your 1 whale, of course, is what you're going to be looking for. Your goal against aggro is to run them out of cards. That's really your only goal. So you just want to 1-for-1 them with like Dreg Dredgers and Vile Feast and Sea Scarab, or sorry, the Deadbloom Wanderers, stuff like that. Maybe Sea Scarab gets you 2 blocks in potentially. And then once your aggro opponent runs out of cards, unless they're playing like Augmented Experimenter or something like that, you should win the game because you'll win after turn like 5+. You're just going to get this heavy advantage of being able to devour their champions and then Nautilus, and then you just kind of poop out a bunch of sea monsters and win the game. Against control decks, the cards you want to see the most are Lure of the Depths. You literally want an opening hand of just Sea Scarabs and Lure of the Depths. If you can go Lure on turn 2, Lure on turn 3 against control, you should win the game 90% of the time. Like, it's really, really free at that point. Eventually, you just, like, slam down a Nautilus. They can't do anything. If it's a control deck that plays Ruination, maybe be a little weary of that. You don't want to just throw up your entire hand for Ruination, but for the most part, you should just absolutely body a lot of the control decks that aren't playing Frostbites, because it eventually gets late enough into the game to where you just play a 7/7 and then Atrocity, and then no control deck can handle like 1 mana 7/7s and 2 mana 7/7s over and over and over again, while also dealing with like elusive threats like 0 mana is going to be like a 5/6, right? So these units are just too big for your opponent to deal with, and then you always just have the treacherous at the very end to deal with, like, okay, here's 3 8/8s, here's like a bunch of random stuff. Oh, I'm going to clear away all of your blockers that you have to chump block me with. And against mid-range, your goal against mid-range is to just try and tempo out, like get deep kind of fast, and then play Nautilus on 7. It's really hard. If your mid-range opponent can't kill the Nautilus on 7, then you are usually winning the game. Because what's going to happen is you're going to play Nautilus on 7. Hopefully he's leveled by then. And then turn 8 is when you start just pop off turns with like 2 mana Devour of the Depths, 1 mana Abyssal Eye, stuff like that. And you just start having nutty turns, and you just out-tempo your opponent, and you just get to play way more cards than they do. And your turn 8 Power Spike is absolutely insane. All you have to do is just make sure you don't die against a lot of these mid-range decks. A lot of mid-range decks right now are running like rallies and these OTK elusive combos that you just can't deal with. For instance, you know, Silver Auction Ionium. They are just going to go, okay, give my unit elusive, double strike, you lose the game. Against Silver Auction Demacia, they're just going to build a decent board on turns like 5 and 6, and then rally twice and you lose the game. So you just really have to figure out ways to not die in the mid-game against mid-range, and this usually comes by just getting turbo deep fast. So your first like 3 and 4 turns should just be only focusing on getting deep. That is the only focus, on getting deep in the first 4 turns, and then your turn 5 and 6 is when you want to start playing your like Abyssal Eyes to stop the elusive combo, and then you want to play your Devour of Depths to try and kill off your opponent's like shins and stuff like that once you hit deep on that turn. Hopefully you're deep by that turn. So the mulligans you're going to want to look for are, again, Drag Dredgers, you know, like Jettison even, Sea Scarab. Of course, you'll always want Lure of the Depths, because Lure of the Depths both helps you get deep as well as makes your sea monsters cheaper. So those are the cards you want to look for, is any of these cards that just help you hyper toss in the early game, including Maokai. Maokai also helps you hyper toss, as well as Maokai can help you kill some of the units that are back row champions. So if they play things like a Rockhopper, any type of 2 HP unit like an Auction, then you can go ahead and play Maokai, get a little sapling, and try and start trading and force out some combat tricks from your opponent. So against mid-range, you literally are just trying to hyper deep against mid-range, so that way your mid and late game like 6, 7, 8 turn Power Spike is too much for them to deal with, assuming they don't kill you with an elusive OTK or a like double rally type of situation. So that's going to be it for this deck guide. I hope you guys liked it. If you guys have any questions about deep, make sure to let me know in the comments below, or join my Discord and ask me there. I'm always responding to people on my Discord. If you want to see another deck on Deck Guide for Dummies, let me know in the comments below what deck you want to see next. Go follow me on Twitch. I stream on there almost every single day. I'll be streaming the seasonal tournament this weekend in Top 32 because I game like that. And yeah, make sure to sub here on YouTube so you don't miss any of the videos, and I'll see you guys in the next video.